Hello guys, and welcome to a new Steel Division video today by me, Vulcan. Today I have for you another battle group overview, this time looking at the 6th Airborne. In this video I'm going to be talking through the units, not necessarily focusing so much on the unit statistics, mainly because I don't want the relevance of this video to decay as balance changes are made. I'll be talking more about the general purpose of each unit and why I've chosen them for my deck. So let's jump in to the recon to start off with. Now with the 6th Airborne, you do get a lot of elite infantry, and they really do play a big part in Phase A. So in Phase A, I have brought in the AB Scouts, the Airborne Scouts. These guys are a 5-man infantry squad, which do have very good stealth and very high optics. Great for supporting your troops on the ground. They're great for supporting your airborne paras, for example, and the Airborne Battlegroup. You keep them with them, they can occupy buildings and provide the extra Bren gun at long range. Also, they do have the 100-meter gammon bombs, which allow them to destroy and ambush enemy vehicles, especially near roads, so that's quite useful. You can also get Pathfinders, which for 10 points more give you a 10-man infantry squad with a lot more HE power. So these guys are actually pretty decent at fighting, and you can use them in conjunction with your mainline infantry to really put a dent in the enemy, as well as providing yourself with recon. Now because these guys are so resilient, I find that I don't normally get through more than 6 squads of them anyway, which is why I am pretty light on recon infantry. You can get airborne snipers in this deck, and I'm not entirely convinced as to what sort of purpose these things will have in the deck. I find that 2-man infantry squad, they fire, they reveal themselves, they die. Pretty much what happens currently, so I'm not entirely convinced about the AB snipers at the moment, although a 3-star sniper squad has the potential to be very good. The carrier recce, the universal carrier with the recon stat and the Boys AT rifle, is an interesting vehicle. Not entirely sure I found a purpose for this yet, other than half-track killing, but generally that can be done by better units. In Phase B, there is a lot of choice in terms of infantry. You can get the recce, you can get the scouts, and you can get the recce and the Humber Mark IIIs as well. You can either get them in the Willys MOG or the Humber Mark III, and I mean, if you were going to get any more recon, I would suggest the recce, the cheapest recce you can get, rather than the Humbers, because the Humbers don't really seem to be worth it anymore. So yeah, I would tend to avoid the Humber Mark III from now on, although it can be useful for destroying enemy half-tracks in Phase B though. Not going to find too much use for it. I, however, currently have the Staghound, more for testing purposes than anything else. AP power of 8 with 7 rounds per minute. It's a little fighting vehicle that can be rather useful, again, for taking out APCs and half-tracks, and does actually have a reasonable amount of armor, especially considering it is an extremely mobile unit. 110 points, I currently feel it's a bit too expensive and will probably have a price drop in the future, but for now, pretty nice unit. Let's move on to infantry. The Airborne Battlegroup is my first card choice. These guys are your mainline infantry for this deck. They're a 10-man infantry squad with a reasonably good HE power. The main thing that makes them amazing though is not only do they have wings, which means they don't get morale penalty for being behind enemy lines, but also they have 2-star veterancy, which with a command unit makes them 3-star, and then they are effective killing machines. Now the AB Battlegroup is more the unit that you are going to use to engage from range, as opposed to the airborne paras, which are best used in close combat. So I am taking a card of the airborne leaders. You definitely need a card in Phase A. Also tempted to take rifle leaders in Phase B to accompany my air landing. However, I think one squad of command infantry in this deck is more than enough to make up for the high veterancy of these units. So yeah, the AB Paras are the good choice. These guys are really good close range infantry. Keep these guys within 100-meter range and you will decimate any infantry that gets in your way. They can also do a reasonable amount of damage from distance, but they won't really match up to the MG42s on the German side of things, so be wary of that. I also take 2 cards of Airborne Vickers. These machine guns are fantastic. 500-meter range kind of lets them down, but they are supremely efficient with a command unit nearby. 3-star machine guns have always been amazing. Now there is the option to get Assault Pioneers in Phase B. Personally, I don't find they're worth it. Not worth the availability at all. Much worth bringing in Air Landing, which are a 7-man infantry squad made to be extremely versatile. They have a reasonable amount of HE on their weapons, allowing them to engage infantry, and they also come with a Piat, which allows them to engage heavier units, all the way up to the heaviest of tanks. So a really nice versatile unit to support your Phase A infantry. Now you've got to be careful in this deck, I feel, that you don't lose or even use too much of your Phase A infantry early in the game, because you will end up running out towards the later phases. So I am kind of worried about availability in this deck, and I'm also worried about command. But currently my setup has suited me well. There's always the choice that you could drop a unit of Airborne Vickers for more Vickers HMGs in Phase B. But currently I haven't found a reason to do this just yet. And having a 2-star Vickers instead of a 3-star, or a 2-star instead of a 1-star, sorry, to me is worth having extra 5 points. Also, Universal Carrier could be useful, but in Phase B, it's generally lost its purpose. So let's move on to the tank tab. This is a very interesting tab of this deck. We can see that you can get Tetrarchs, and these are really awesome little tanks. So I really like these tanks just for their looks, really, and also the fact that they were glider-borne, which is really, really awesome. It's one of those designs that really surprised me when I was starting to learn about World War II, like Tetrarch tanks being flown in gliders. Just to me seems silly, but absolutely awesome design. So these are command Tetrarchs. They have 8 AP and they have 1 machine gun which has 8 HE power. Now you got to be careful because that machine gun only has 600-meter range, and the main gun has 1000-meter range but doesn't have any HE value, so can't engage like AT guns, for example, at max range. You don't want this thing to bump into AT guns. Same with the Tetrarch Little John. You will lose every single time. Now, since this is a 1-star command Tetrarch, I am going to be focusing on bringing in just 1 card of those, and then 1 card of the Tetrarch Little Johns. Now, the Tetrarch Little John, again, you need to worry about range. 800-meter range on the main barrel is, I mean, it makes him great for ambushing more than anything else, because you never want to really engage at max range with any of the Tetrarchs because they just don't have the accuracy to pull it off. So the command Tetrarch has 4 accuracy. It's only a 1-star veterancy, so it will struggle to hit quite often. And the Tetrarch Little John, well, that has 5 accuracy but isn't veteran. So unless it's got a command Tetrarch nearby, is not going to hit its target very often, which is definitely the case. And I find that although they are worth their points, they definitely have let me down a lot in the past. So let's have a look at these little Tetrarchs. You can bring in 5 of these in 1 card for 55 points. Pretty much the same stat values as the command Tetrarch, but obviously getting way more availability and don't have the 1-star veterancy. For 55 points, I think the Tetrarchs are nice little tanks, but I find the Tetrarch Little John to be a lot more useful in Phase A for ambushing not only things in Phase A, but also Phase B and Phase C. 14 AP power is pretty potent. In Phase B, I think it's definitely recommended that you bring in at least one card of Cromwell's. They do have 11 AP and 5 HE on their main gun, alongside 2 8 HE 600 range machine guns. So these guys can definitely help your infantry with that fire support. 7 armor in the front isn't fantastic, so be careful, but 11 AP is more than enough to penetrate Panzer IVs and so on. Now moving into Phase C, I have just got 2 cards of challengers. These are the 16 AP powered tanks with only 7 front armor. Very high power vehicles or tanks, actually weak to accuracy basically, and although they can be exceptional, they just lack against enemy Panthers, for example. So Befell Panther with 2-star veterancy will literally just one-pop these things every time with 16 AP power or even 17 AP power straight into the front armor of that 7 front armor. Every time is pretty much going to be a one-shot. So just keep them at max range. Try and use the 6 accuracy of the gun to engage things from max range. Just be careful with them because they are extremely brittle. Now I would maybe suggest bringing in some Command Cromwells in Phase C, but currently I haven't found the need to have these instead of challengers. So that's why I haven't brought in any Command Cromwells. Moving on to the support tab. Support tab is pretty weak on this deck. I have got some airborne jeeps with the supply in Phase A. I've also got the Tetrarch CS's, which do give you a 1000 meter range 9 HE power cannon. This is actually pretty decent at engaging AT guns at long range, as well as providing infantry support for pushes into towns. This is only a 60-point tank, and it can definitely help out with your infantry in those combined pushes. Now, I was looking at the Jeep Vickers, and the Jeep Vickers do have 8 HE. They're only 25 points, and I feel like these would be fantastic fire support vehicles for, again, pushes into town and so on. So I'm tempted to try them out, but I haven't had a chance just yet. Flamethrower squads I feel aren't great, so I would avoid those. But moving into Phase B, there's definitely reason to be bringing in a Cromwell 6. These things have 13 HE power and 1200 meter range, which allows them to engage 1000 meter range AT guns from out of range, which is great. Also, if you get them on target to a 1200 meter range AT gun, generally you can win a fight against them, as long as the AT gun doesn't penetrate you on the first hit. Now in Phase B, I do bring in 2 dingoes. These are little command units, and they're pretty important in this deck because I don't bring in the Command Cromwells in Phase C. So I'm relying a lot on extra support from the support tab. Same with the infantry tab, I don't bring in a second unit of command infantry. So having command on the support tab is pretty important. And honestly, I've even been thinking about bringing in some more, but I'm just trying to find ways to replace them with something. But either way, don't need the Bedford supply in Phase C, can't get any more supply in Phase B, so yeah, I don't think supply is particularly important in this deck. Let's move on to anti-tank. In the anti-tank tab, I do bring in 1 card of the Piats, just because you are so light on anti-tank in the early game. Piat squads have the 200 meter range. This can be extremely useful in certain situations. You do get your hands on a captured pack, which is really nice. 13 AP power, 1200 meter range. Really, really nice. And this will be in pretty much everybody's deck. There's no point in not having this. The Piet squads, they're debatable. I find that they are necessary just because, again, you have a massive lack of AT. In Phase B, I have one card of the 3 6-pounders, the 11 AP power guns. 75 points, they're pretty expensive. They do come with a 15-point universal carrier. You can use that to move the AT guns around quicker and also to provide infantry support. And then I also have a card of the 17-pounder. This is just a single 17-pounder with 16 AP power. I feel like this is sometimes really necessary in Phase B to deal with some of the heavier tanks that the Germans can muster. So having at least one of those felt necessary to me. And moving into Phase C, 4 more 17-pounders definitely does the job in terms of AT. I've always found that these AT guns do look pretty funny. They have this straight up armor plate on the front of them. And it's a shame that the HE value was taken away from the 17-pounders currently. I'm going to wonder if that returns in the future. But for now, 17-pounders just there for AT. We move on to the anti-air tab. This is a pretty simple one. Take all of the tri-Polstons you can get. The normal Polstons just aren't really worth it when you can get a tri-Polston that gives you 13 HE power. These things can like one volley like retreat a plane. So like a plane comes over, tri-Polston opens up onto it, one volley from the tri-Polston and the plane will be panicked and be forced to fall back. That's generally what I see with these tri-Polstons, and you can get 5 of them and that will shoot down enemy aircraft very effectively. You can get CMP Polstons on trucks. Not worth it in my opinion. The truck dies, you lose your AA. At least if a bomb lands next to like a tri-Polston, for example, with 6 strength, you might actually survive. Staghound AAs just don't seem worth it to me. They rely on a 50 cal and a 30 cal, and they don't particularly stun too quickly compared to the tri-Polstons. The tri-Polstons are definitely more worth it in my opinion. Moving on to the artillery tab. Now this is an interesting one because there's some really large artillery in this deck. These Willys OP off-map artillery, they come with a naval battery that gives you a 381mm gun to use. Pretty crazy, but before we look at that, I would suggest bringing in at least one card of the 3-inch mortars. Now with a command unit nearby you can make these 2 stars and they actually have a pretty decent rate of fire and range. It can be a really useful mortar squad to have. You can also bring in the ABM1 howitzers. These guys are just fantastic for counter battery arty in the early game. So if you're having troubles with people using mortars against you, bring in one of these and you can use it to stun the enemy mortars from out of range. That's what I would bring in one of these for, but I don't particularly find that I struggle against enemy mortars very often. So my second choice in Phase A is this Jeep I was talking about. So this naval battery has 27 HE power and 111 meter AoE currently. Really nice, strong artillery at the start of the game can really help you break through those strong points that you bump into. So for example, if you're fighting over a town with somebody and you're struggling against that infantry, bring in one of these and just drop a naval battery bombardment on top of them and they will regret moving into that town. That's for sure. In Phase B, you have the option of more mortars. By Phase B, I don't feel the relevance of this 4.2-inch mortar is worth it. And same with the 2-inch mortar carriers. These guys should be available in Phase A instead of Phase B because they are actually completely useless otherwise. You would never ever want to bring these in Phase B. Unless you needed them for smoke support maybe, but I don't know why you would waste a card on those. More Phase B 75mm howitzers, not really worth it in my opinion. And Phase B AOP carriers, however, these guys have 203mm batteries. And this is definitely something you could consider, but personally I go for the card in Phase C, another Willys OP, with the 381mm naval battery. You can get 2 more of them, and they can be extremely useful for helping you hold in Phase C, and also just push again. You can definitely continue to make ground if you use these correctly. Let's move on to the air tab. So the air tab in this deck is a very nice one. It allows you to bring in quite a lot of units. In Phase A, I would definitely recommend a fighter and the Mosquito Pathfinder. So the Tempest is actually a really nice vehicle, or at least a really nice aircraft. It has good agility and 675km/h speed. So a very fast plane, very fast fighter. Not much can match up to this with those 4 20mm cannons. So very, very effective, very, very fast. Good reactionary fighter in Phase A. Also, this Mosquito Pathfinder, the napalm bomb. It comes in with 4 napalm bombers. So this has 4 HE or 4 12HE bombs, sorry. And yeah, it's a napalm bomber which comes with napalm bombs. So really, really useful for bombing AT positions, large groups of enemy infantry, but mainly static units like enemy AA units or enemy AT positions, more specifically enemy sort of buildings that are occupied. If you don't want them to be occupied anymore, just drop napalm on them and they won't be. So yeah, fantastic for that kind of thing. And they do have an initial like explosion radius, I feel, and then they also just provide the damage over time with the napalm that they leave behind. So very effective aircraft for Phase A. Furthermore, they do have machine guns, so if you manage to bring them in behind an aircraft that gets too close to your airborne, you can shoot them down, which is quite nice. In Phase B, I do bring in 2 more of these Tempests, just to provide myself with more fighters. Then I go for 1 card of the Typhoon bombers, which have the 2 15HE bombs. And I bring these in over the Mosquitoes because I feel that the 10HE bombs on the Mosquito aren't as good. And although the Mosquito can be quite a nice interceptor, I feel like the Typhoon does the job better with the 2 15HE bombs. So this is my choice. This will definitely destroy anything that you target other than medium and heavy tanks, of course. Whereas the Mosquito might fail to finish off units, which the Typhoon would otherwise kill, which is why I prefer the Typhoon in this case. Now there is an argument to take Typhoon ATs in Phase B because there will be a lot of targets for it. However, I take 1 card in Phase C, where you can get 2 more. And I also bring in 1 card of the Mosquito bombers with the 4 15HE bombs, because to me 15HE bombs are worth a lot more than 10HE bombs. And that's pretty much my Air Force. I really, really like the British planes. Who doesn't? Tempests are very, very awesome aircraft, and so are the Mosquitoes, honestly. They do have good resilience in this game, which does allow them to take quite a lot of punishment. Definitely be aware of that. But that's pretty much it for my 6th Airborne deck. Let's just have a quick talk about how units complement each other and how I feel the deck should be played moving into Phase A. So at the start of the game, I would generally go for quite a large infantry presence. You can afford to bring in, 4 units of infantry for 100 points. So I would generally spend about 250 points on infantry at the start of the game. It depends on what you're doing on the map. But you can bring in your airborne leader with your airborne paras and your airborne vicars to just get 3-star infantry all over the place. Definitely bring in some pathfinders or some airborne scouts to allow yourself the like enough recon. And then also think about bringing in your tetrarchs, but make sure that you use them smartly. Use the Tetrarch Little John within its maximum range as opposed to letting it being sniped by AT guns. Got to be very careful about that. And then you can bring in the mortars to smoke off your units in the beginning of the game. If you're struggling with enemy air attacks, bring in the Tempest. If you're struggling with AT guns, bring in the Mosquito Pathfinder and just burn that. Definitely bring in the pack at the start of the game. I feel like it's probably one of the most important units to bring at the start. And then as you move into Phase B, what you want to be doing is filling the holes with the rest of your infantry. Bring in the Cromwells to support your pushes with something a bit more substantial. Bring in the Dingoes if you need more command. And you can now reinforce yourself with some better AT. If you're still struggling with hardpoints, maybe bring in your Willys OP 381mm naval battery. That thing just does so much work. Even maybe think about bringing it in Phase A if you're struggling to break through. But in Phase B, the Typhoon bombers can definitely destroy lots for you. And then you can continue to push through with your Cromwells, with your infantry. Just keep it smoked with the mortars. And cover it off where you can. So that's pretty much it. And then moving into Phase C, well, things start to get a bit more difficult, although you do have 4 16 or 17 pounders in Phase C to bring in alongside your challengers. So it does allow you to hold very well. And I feel like in this deck, you can take a position very effectively early on. And then the challenge is to hold it in Phase C. You can definitely continue to make ground in Phase B. Find that this deck is extremely versatile for that purpose. But in Phase C, you generally start to get overwhelmed by the more elite units. Well, not necessarily elite, but more technologically advanced units of the Germans. So there you have it. That's my battle group overview of the 6th Airborne. Make sure you let me know, guys, what you think of my deck, what your own decks look like. Give me your opinions and thoughts on each of the units. Very much appreciate that in the comments, and it helps people who watch the video understand the different thoughts and so on behind the different decks and helps them make their own. So yeah, I appreciate all of your guys' comments as always. Yeah, let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.